economic situations in Russia, they feel confident across the globe.
Right. So yes, as I pointed out, regarding with the mounting pressure, one way that Russia tries to circumvent or to alleviate this increasing pressure, especially from Western countries and other countries across the globe, is to find support for themselves, whether it's through bilateral means, whether it's through multilateral means, through various organizations that Russia is a part of, or through other global organizations such as the United Nations, in trying to lobby for support in rejecting certain UNGA resolution, for example, or to outright reject any resolution out of the United Nations Security Council, perhaps. We've seen this, and I think what we're looking at is quite a divided world in a way that as countries such as Russia tries to find allies, tries to find some friends who will lend support, it sort of provides this new blocks, new groupings of states that are more pro towards Russia and its cause, and states that are against Russia or Vladimir Putin and seeks to push Russia away from Ukraine. So that's one way that Russia is currently doing. It's trying to find support. It's trying to find friends, whether it's within the vicinity of its geographical location, or even from far abroad, such as within Asia, Southeast Asia, Africa, and even South America, to that extent. So, and I think at this stage they do find some success, some limited one, but it's still enough to keep them going and to exact pressure back towards Ukraine and the West.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Gilang, as Indonesia is now holding the presidency of G20, last June, President Joko Widodo has visited these two conflicting countries, both Russia and Ukraine, trying to
broker peace.
To be a broker peace. Then the response was not so encouraging, and these two presidents decided not to come to Bali, but will attend the summit virtually. So how do you see this condition? What do you think about this?
Well, and a very short answer, if I were to put myself in the shoes of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and I'd breathe a sigh of relief, to be honest, because it would be one less drama to worry about.
Yeah.
Worrying about whether Vladimir Putin might run into Joe Biden or the Western countries in one stage. That's in one way I can put it, that it's breathing a sigh of relief. But on the other side of the coin, I understand that this might limit the engagement of Russia, particularly in engaging in issues that are more pertinent, such as ensuring steady access of food, for example, or other strategic commodities such as energy commodities, and also it may limit the ability in discussing other issues such as post-pandemic recovery issues and financing issues, which may be represented by Foreign Minister Lavrov or any of the Russian contingent within the G20. Although it's yet to be seen in what capacity or to what extent does the participation of President Putin and President Zelensky virtually within the G20 may amount to, I would just say that because they would attend it virtually, then there's no time, or at least there may be very little in ways to conduct sort of like an informal discussions or conduct a discussion, or even to hear the opposing sides from members of G20 or other external members towards Russian actions in Ukraine. So it is a safe choice. It's a choice that we sort of expected for months, but it in some ways I do hope it doesn't limit the ability of G20 to provide an outcome to all of the goals that it has set out for the past 1 year. But again, as I mentioned, it remains to be seen in what capacity does the Russian contingent would then provide with the absence of President Vladimir Putin in Bali next week.
But previously, actually, the president of Russia, Putin, has stated that actually he will come to the Bali summit, but then he said that he will not come. The statement keeps changes. And what do you think, Gilang? They say that the Putin will cancel to attend the meeting here in Bali, but will be represented by the Russian foreign minister. What is actually happening? Why Putin keep change his statement, deciding whether to attend physically here in Bali, but then saying that he will attend virtually? How do you see?
So if I can provide one analysis by providing a contrast or comparison with Putin's attendance in the 2014 G20 summit in Australia, where there is in some way or another similar sort of situation where in 2014 Russia has just annexed Crimea illegally.
Yeah.
But despite that violation, Russia, represented by President Putin, still showed itself. Putin still showed himself in Australia, appearing physically within the G20 summit. Now, if I can make a comparison, the situation in 2014 for Russia in 2022 is on completely different levels. In 2014, at the outcome of the Ukrainian sort of crisis precipitated by the Maidan revolution in early 2014, Russia came out at the stronger end. You know, it took over control of Crimea. It has separatist rebels that are in support of Russia. At that moment, well, we couldn't really say whether they have direct support from Russia or not, but they are in support of the Russia, and had, you know, these rebels have now sort of joined with the Russian forces against Ukraine. And in 2014, they were on top. But in 2022, we see that situation is in reverse. Russia is, in a way, losing grounds in Ukraine. The rebel fighters are also not in an ideal position. Their supplies are dwindling as well. They don't have the same sort of morale, perhaps, as it was in 2014. And that, as we mentioned before, pressure against Russia is even higher in 2022 than in 2014, causing Russia to become much more of a pariah state rather than one that can challenge the hegemony of the West. So if Russia were to come in 2022, it would be a very, people would provide a sort of like a cold shoulder, maintaining arm's length with Vladimir Putin. There wouldn't be some sort of a very limited koala diplomacy, if I may say. If we can remember the image that President Putin holding a koala, given by Prime Minister Blair at that time. So there won't be anything like this. Putin has really pushed himself into a corner. And it knows, at least from my perspective, we can see that the Russian standing internationally has diminished, has literally gone down because of his actions in Ukraine in the past 8 months.
Right. So much has changed in 2014 to 2022, as you mentioned, because it was indeed the annexations of Crimea that became the origin story to what we're actually seeing now in Ukraine.
Yep.
And piggybacking on what you just said earlier about a sigh of relief, in a way, that Vladimir Putin will not be attending in person, but virtually instead, and the in-person delegates will be represented by the Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov. Do you think that in a way, public has been expecting that at some point when there was confirmation of in-person attendance, people would just think that, oh, Putin will be here, Joe Biden will be here, heads of states of Western alliances will be here, so we can expect they all to meet here at the same table, and it'll lead to a historic moment where right after the summit in Bali, the war in Ukraine
will stop,
may end, or at least a ceasefire. Was that too wild of a dream, Gilang?
Well, I kept saying that nothing is impossible, but it is certainly something that, in realistic term, may be quite far. But it is people do sort of feel that it could be a moment where, sort of like a miracle moment, perhaps, that by Putin attending and perhaps having a discussion with most of the Western leaders, that G20 can provide the answer to Ukraine. But unfortunately, if I can break the bubble here, it might not be the case. Not only after Putin has decided not to come, but even if Vladimir Putin is to come to Bali in next week, I kept thinking that it would be a very it would be a very staged, very carefully elaborated sort of entry and exit, and a lot of intricacies and ways from our part, the host, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to ensure that there will be as minimum, as small of a drama as possible. We've seen this at the foreign ministers meeting in July in Bali during the G20 FMM, where Sergei Lavrov, when he attended that meeting, we had one journalist that sort of shouted against him, why did you start the war? So that's sort of like something that was unexpected. And then we heard that after Sergei Lavrov provided his remarks, he was then he cut short of his attendance in G20 and left. A lot of Western medias commented it as a walkout. The perspectives from us, the host, is that Foreign Minister Lavrov has other things to do, and etc. So it would be this sort of like a drama stage where we ensure that all countries have a say, all members have a say, but we stage it in a way that it does not interfere, it does not cause a lot of scene between one country to another. And I think the same sort of formula would have been utilized if Putin would to engage and participate in Bali next week. But as we heard as well in the past couple of days, I think the Minister of Foreign Affairs did also gave some indication on a meeting between the U.S. and Russia in Bali, which was rejected by the United States. And I think this is also quite, we kind of expect that this would happen as well. There would be very little in ways of achievements should there be any meetings between the United States and Russia, or Russia with any other Western countries. So I don't think that even if there is Vladimir Putin, very little headway can be achieved to find solutions to the Russo-Ukrainian war there.
Yeah, well, it's interesting when you mentioned that we need to look back in retrospect to the foreign ministers meeting of the G20 back in July, because both of us, Joe, Defi and I, we were there. We witnessed for ourselves the very account of intricacies, as you mentioned, the complications as the host, Indonesia, had to arrange in terms of arrivals, table settings, and all of these protocolarism affairs that we need to deal with in terms of putting all of these heads of, by then was foreign ministers together. In this case, heads of states, Western alliances versus Russia's. And a lot of analysts said, Gilang, that the foreign ministers meeting in July in Bali of the G20 a while ago would set precedent to what we'll need to do for the summit, the upcoming summit just next week. So what sort of lesson learned do you think that we've had from the foreign ministers meeting that should be carefully orchestrated for the upcoming summit?
Yes, well, that's a good word. Yeah, orchestrated. So things will be much more stringent now. Things will be much more rigid. Security will be tightened. More sort of perhaps scanning of suspicious behaviors and etc. Of course, is part of the ordeal and SOPs, but the orchestration of perhaps more on the political sphere, the intricacies, the level of details in on whether or not how to greet and where to greet, or perhaps in what ways we greet these world leaders, may also provide a difference. And perhaps which heads of leaders come first, and etc. All these intricacies will be orchestrated at pre-mediated beforehand to ensure that there won't be any sort of awkwardness, there won't be any sort of conflicts that may happen. Now, even though that President Vladimir Putin himself may not come, but we know that Foreign Minister Lavrov will also be there. It signals that there will still be Russian delegations within in Bali during the G20 summit, right? So even then, even though that there may be some, sigh of relief that Putin will not be there, there is still some homework to be done to ensure perhaps that when Russian delegation is in the same vicinity with the other members of the G20, especially the Western ones, how to ensure that there won't be any sort of like a quote unquote ambushes, political ambushes, or perhaps they don't fall into sort of like a sort of debate or any sort of perhaps some awkwardness in within the same room or something. So it's something that we learn is to ensure that we would expect any sort of possibility. So like I said, people should, we always think that anything is possible during this summit. So be prepared for any sort of, unexpected things, unexpected outcomes, and ensure that all of this would run in a smooth manner, in a pre-mediated form.
Dilang, we will need you to stay with us for a little while. We need to take a very, very short break. We will continue on with the conversations just right after this very special feature that we've put together on the beautiful arts and culture of Bali. There's full of it here in the Islands of the Gods, right, Chodefi?
Exactly. So why don't we just see it now?
Right. It's about, I think, some sort of paintings and sculptures. So let's just have a look.
In addition to having a variety of cultural charms and exotic nature, Bali also has a number of extraordinary works of visual art, painting and also sculpture, to name a few. Painting in Bali has indeed developed from prehistoric times, as evidenced by the discovery of historical objects, which are also carved into art paintings, such as NEGARAs, sarcophagi, as well as a number of stone objects. Being able to witness the ability of the ancestors in producing artistic works of art. Its development is quite rapid, especially when Bali is popular as a tourist destination. Nowadays, we find many paintings that are sold in various places, especially in art markets such as Sukawati, Guwang, Kumbasari, souvenir markets like Krishna, Hawaii Bali, and many other locations. Bali has a large number of tourist attractions. The paintings that are sold in various places are of course affordable and of different quality when you visit painting